Hey everybody, it's Masai here, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to integrate Clio with N8N so that you can build your workflows, automations, and agents. If you don't know, Clio is a very popular legal software, and N8N is a no-code, low-code development platform. You can use N8N to build workflows and automations, and also to do a lot of work with AI agents, with different LLM chains and stuff like that. So I'm really excited for this video. It's a really important concept because we are going to be integrating a really popular legal software that a lot of you guys may already be using. There's obviously an infinite amount of workflows you could build from this. This specific one is going to be a RAG system. You can imagine something like this being useful in a personal injury case where we're dealing with a lot of medical records, and you need to find the first time that someone reported they had some sort of radiating pain down their leg or something like that. If you don't know me, my name is Masai, and I help solo attorneys and boutique firms to leverage AI in ways that save them time and money. Okay, great. So let's get into the demo. First thing we're going to do is go to N8N, create a workflow. Then our first step for the sake of this tutorial is going to be a manual trigger. So we're going to trigger this using a click. You might want to trigger it some other ways. You might want to trigger it to run every day or every week, every month on a schedule. You may want to connect it to your MCP server. There's a lot of ways you could trigger it, but for the sake of this workflow, what we're going to do is we're going to trigger this using a click. And I'm going to show you now how you can connect to the Cleo API so you can build workflows. All kinds of workflows, AI workflows, regular automation workflows, everything that you need in N8N. So the first thing we have to do is go to developers.clio.com. Obviously, you're going to need a Clio account. You're going to need a paid Clio account in order to do this. And you're going to come into the developer portal, which you can find again at developers.clio.com. We'll have you sign in. And what you're going to do is create a new app. There's only a few things you have to worry about here. Put a name in here. Say, I'll call this YouTube demo. Don't have to worry about the description. We don't have to worry about icons. What we need is the website URL and the redirect URI. So I'm going to show you how to get both of those in a second. So the website URL is just going to be the first part of the URL that you're using to access N8N. This is my self-hosted instance. I'm going to copy and paste this into the website URL. If you're running N8N on the cloud, whenever you log in and you are in your account, there will be a URL here that is unique to you, and you're going to want to copy and paste that into the website URL section here. And then the redirect URI, I'm going to show you where you can find that as well. So in order to get the redirect URI, we're going to come back into N8N. We're going to go into the top right. We're going to create a credential. We're going to look for an OAuth 2 API credential. So we're going to scroll down all the way to O. Let's see. OAuth 2 API. Click continue, and then the OAuth redirect URL is what we're going to grab here. So again, yours will probably be something different, but you're going to grab it from this section here. Copy, go back into Clio, and then paste that into the redirect URI section. Then from here, you have to agree to the terms of service, the developer terms of service, and then you are going to want to select whatever permissions are going to be required for your app. Whatever your app needs access to. Maybe you're building an automation for billing and you want to give it access to billing, calendars, whatever you have to give it access to, you're going to want to select those right now. So I'm going to go and select all of those, and then I will be right back. Okay, so I've selected all the scopes, all the permissions here, and then I'm going to click Save. Now I see my app has successfully been created. And the two main things that we are going to need are the client ID and the client secret. That is what is going to allow us to create our Clio credential in N8N that we're going to use to make all of our API calls. So we're going to come back to this in a second. So now we want to come back to that same OAuth 2 API credential that we created before. We want to give this a name, call it Clio YouTube demo. Then for the authorization URL and the access token URL, I'm going to go and grab those and give those to you guys in a second. Okay, so these are the URLs that you need for the authorization URL and the token URL. The authorization URL, you have app.clio.com/OAuth/authorize. And then for the access token URL, we have the same thing, app.clio.com, OAuth/token. Now, one thing that is important to remember, if you are outside of the US, then you are going to want to change this. If you are in Europe, you should be able to get through with eu.app.clio.com. I believe Canada is CA, and I think Australia is AU. But I'm assuming most of you guys watching this video will be in the US, so you'll be able to get through with this URL just fine. And now, obviously, for the client ID and the client secret, we're just going to copy and paste exactly what we have in our app into these sections here. We don't have to worry about scopes. We don't have to worry about query parameters, and we have to make sure authentication says header authentication, and that's pretty much it. So we can go ahead and click connect my account. We're going to get sent to a Clio endpoint, whereas essentially it's going to be us signed into our Clio account and just Clio asking us to authorize this application. Going to click allow access. Now we see the connection has been successful. This window will close in a couple seconds. And now we have our Clio account connected. And so we're going to use the same credential in all of the HTTP requests that we make to the Cleo API. So now we have our OAuth credential set up. Then we can pull our documents from Clio into N8N. We have configured our credential to be able to access Clio. I'm going to show you how to do your HTTP requests now so that you can actually be able to execute whatever actions you need to execute in Clio. Basically, the next thing that we're going to select is an HTTP request, HTTP. And then for the authentication, you want to select generic credential type, and you want to select OAuth 2 API, and you want to select the credential that we just created. So I have Clio YouTube demo here, and then what we're going to need now is we have to configure this request. Basically, what we're doing is we're sending a message to Clio telling it exactly what we want to get from it, right? So in order to get the information about how to configure these requests, we're going to head over to the Clio API documentation. And you can find the Clio API documentation at docs.developers.clio.com, API reference. Obviously, there are a lot of things that you can do. You can look over in the menu here and you can see a ton of things, a ton of actions that you can do, that you can automate and build out. We have some things for billing here, calendar, payments, a lot of stuff. What we are trying to do is we are trying to pull some documents that I have in Clio, pull them into N8N, and then be able to break them up, vectorize them, and put them in a database. So what I'm going to do is go to this document section here. And the first thing that I need to do is return the data for all the documents, because what I need is the document IDs to be able to then download those documents and build out my RAG pipeline. I'm going to select the get request here, return the data for all documents. I have my URL here on the right-hand side. I can see that it's a get request. So I'm going to go back into N8N, and I will make sure that my method says get. And then for the URL, I will just copy the URL in the US region production server. Obviously, if you're in Europe, you can use the Europe endpoint, or if you're in Canada or in Australia, you would use whichever endpoint is relevant to you depending on your location. So I'm going to copy this endpoint, go back into the demo. I paste my endpoint here, and then I need to check if there's anything else that I need to include in this request in order to get the information I want. What I know I will need is I will need matter ID, because I want to make sure that I'm just pulling the documents from this specific matter and no other matters. This documentation will tell me how to format that request. I can see that in the query parameters, these are the different things that I can include, right? So in the query parameters here, if I want to get the documents related to a certain matter, I will just grab the matter ID, I'll copy that, I'll go into N8N, and I will check this switch here to send the query parameters. I will put a name for the query parameter, and then the value here is going to be exactly what it tells us in the API reference. It's going to be an integer. It's going to be essentially the number value for the ID of our matter. And so the way to find that is you just go back into Clio, you go into your URL when you're actually inside the matter that you want to access or reference, and then all you're going to do is copy the number string after matters / as the first /, you're going to copy all of these numbers here. So you're going to copy that, and then we can paste this into N8N, and this should configure our request. I'm going to change this to get document IDs, rename this, and then I'll execute this step. And so now I can see this has executed successfully. I have all of the IDs for all the documents in the specific matter. I can see here I have 4 IDs here, and I have 4 documents in this matter. So what I want to do is I want to split this out, because currently this is one item. I want to split this out into different items. I want to be able to see each document separately. So in order to do that, I'm going to grab a split out node, and for the fields to split out, I'm just going to select this field here, which is data, and put that into the fields to split out section, and then execute this step. So now I have 4 different items, each one with an ID for all of my documents. And from there, I can continue building out my workflow. So now what we're going to do is we're going to store a few of these variables, and we are going to create a loop so that we can upload each document into our vector database. In terms of setting up the vector database, I'm not going to cover that in this video. I will leave a link to a previous video where I actually covered that entire setup process. If you haven't watched that video yet, you can watch that, and then that will get you set up with using Supabase as a vector database, and kind of explain what vector databases are and what RAG is. So there's that. But what we're going to do now is we're going to create a loop so that we can take each of the documents, download them, and upload them to our vector database. So I'll find a node called split in batches, loop over items, and then I will choose a set node because I want to set the file ID here for the files that I'm going to download. So if I run this loop over items step, I can see that I have only one of the 4 IDs that's come through, because we're going to loop through obviously each of the 4 IDs. And what we want to do is we want to take that ID and we want to set it to the value of the file ID. Now we are going to run a step to get rid of any duplicate documents, right? Obviously, if we've already uploaded a document to our database, we don't want to upload the same document again. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete any documents that have a matching ID. This will also help for if you update a document. That way you will get rid of the old version and you'll only have the new version inside of your database. So I'll select the Supabase node. Again, if you don't know how to set up Supabase, you're going to want to watch a previous video in which I walk you through how to set up Supabase and how to use Supabase as the vector database for your RAG systems. But I'll take my Supabase node. I will connect my credential here. I'll select my table name, and then for select type, I will select string. And then for the filters, I'll make sure to filter and delete any files that have a matching file ID as the file that I'm currently uploading. We're just going to want to copy and paste exactly what we see here. We are going into the metadata and we are finding any files that have a file ID that matches the file ID of the field that we are referencing here. So once we do that, we can run this step and that will delete any matching fields. And we can see, because I've already run this before, this will be deleting all of the documents and records I had in the database prior. So now I should have a nice clean empty database. So now we have to actually get the documents. We want to download those documents so we can upload them to our database. These 2 steps are a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to walk you through them now. So we're going to use an HTTP request. For authentication, we're going to select generic credential type, and we're going to go to our OAuth2 API. We're going to select the same credential that we've been using so far this entire time, and then I'm going to show you where to find the endpoint. So what I can do is I can go back to the documentation. I know I want to download the document, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this download the document section here in the API documentation. I'm going to copy and paste this endpoint into N8N. I'll copy this, paste this here. I see it's also a GET request, so I'm going to make sure that I have a GET request here. And we have to do a little bit of configuring stuff here. So first thing that I can see is that we have this ID variable here in the endpoint. What we're going to want to do is replace this with the ID of our document that we want to download. So if we come over here, we can see all of the inputs that have come into our node. And what we want to do is just grab the file ID and replace this ID section here with our actual file ID. Once we have our file ID variable set here, we can see we have a properly configured endpoint. We have our credential in here. What you're going to notice if you try to do this without configuring this request properly is that you should get an error when you first try to do this. So I'm going to run it now and I should get an error. Oh, God. Okay, this is actually a good learning point. So what we have to do in the Supabase node is we have to remember to always turn on the always output data section. Otherwise, nothing will pass on to our later nodes. So now that that's on, when I run this HTTP request, I should get an error when I run this. Right, so I have an error here. I'll kind of go and explain what's happening a bit. Essentially what's happening is 2 requests are being made when we make one request to Clio, and then Clio redirects us to the actual location to download the the file that we need. Unfortunately, it's not going to work for you to just use your credential for both of those requests. So basically what we have to do is you have to split that process into two different segments. And I'm going to explain that now. But basically what we need to do here is we need to change a couple of things. So in the options section, we need to add an option. We need to open redirects, and we also need response as well. So what we need to do is turn off redirects, because essentially what's happening here is we're sending a request off to Clio. Clio is receiving our request, and then after that, Clio is then redirecting us to the URL where we can download the document. So two sort of actions are happening. But on the second action, we don't need the authorization of our OAuth credential. And so we're getting this bad request because we're sending our credential off for both of those requests, and it's not needed. It's not needed to verify both of those requests. Don't worry if that doesn't make sense. As long as you follow along here, then you'll be able to get through. But in case you're wondering why that happens, that's kind of the reasoning behind it. So what we have to do is split those two actions into individual actions and give the correct authorization for both of those. So we turn off follow redirects, and we're going to turn on include responses, headers, and status, and we're going to turn on never error. The response format should be fine as an auto detect, and then we should be able to test this now. So if I execute this step, now I see I'm going to get a response that has a location in it. And this location is a temporary location where our files that are in Clio are being stored. And when we access this location, we can actually download those files. So this is the first request we have to make to find the document locations. I can rename this here. And then the second request we have to make is an actual download request to download those documents. So we've gotten sort of the secret location of where our documents are being stored. And now, since we have that location, we don't need any authorization to be able to actually download these documents. So what I can do is just grab the URL for the location where the document is being stored. And I don't need any authentication for this. I can change this name here to download documents, rename this, and I can execute this step, and I can see I have my client intake form downloaded into my N8N instance. That's the entire process to get your files from Clio into N8N. And then obviously from there, we can run a few more steps. There's one more thing that I want to show you guys, because you are probably going to want to store the name of your file and the file ID in your whatever vector database you're going to use. And it's a little bit of a complicated process, not super complicated, but it can be a bit complicated to do that. And N8N from Clio. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So now that we have downloaded the document, the next thing we want to do is extract the text from the document. And then later on, we are going to grab the file name and also the ID of the file and pass text, file name, file ID into our database, so that when we're talking to our agent later on, we can ask it, hey, where did you get this information from? What file did you get this information from, right? So the first thing that we're going to do is actually extract the text from the file. We're going to choose extract from PDF here. And then when we run this, call this extract text, rename. When we run this, we can see the text is being extracted here, but we want to add an option here. We want to add an option here to keep the source. We want to keep the source binary as we're passing this on. So that way we can still be able to reference the file name in our later steps. So you see now when I execute this and I keep the source binary, not only do I have the text from the document, but I also have the binary of the document, meaning I can still reference the file name in later steps. So text extracted, binary also being passed on. What I'm going to do now is have a variable. So I'll do a set variable step, and I will set the file name in this step. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this variable file name. The value of the variable is going to be a variable. You just want to copy exactly what I'm putting in here. It's going to be a variable binary.data.file capital N name. And so now we are going to store the file name into this variable here. And we can use that later on as we start to store things into our vector database. So we see I have the file name here. And then the last thing that we want is to take this text that we've extracted and actually store that in a variable that we can pass into our vector database. So I'm going to set another variable here. I'm going to call this variable text. And then I'm just going to go back to the extract text step. I'm going to drag and drop the text in here. And if I execute this step, then I can see that I have this variable text now with the text from the earlier step in this variable. So now what I can do is I'll rename this to extract text, rename. And then from here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take all this information, I'm going to upload it to my vector database. Again, if you don't know how to set up a vector database, if you don't know how to use Supabase as a vector database, if you're completely new to vector databases and RAG, there is a video in the description. You can go and watch that, and you can go and set up a RAG database if you have never done it before. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab my Supabase vector store, and I'm going to select add documents to vector store. And then from here, I will choose the correct credential. I'll select the correct table, and then I'll also need to choose my embeddings. We're going to choose OpenAI embeddings for this video, and then our document loader. So for our document loader, we're just going to select our default data loader. We're going to also make sure we include metadata, because metadata is where the file name and the file ID is going to show up. So add this property, file name, and the value of the file name is going to be the file name from the earlier set file name step. And then the file ID we will store as well. The file ID we'll grab from the earlier file ID step. So now we have the file name will be stored in the metadata, and the file ID will also be stored in the metadata. And then also have to choose a text splitter, which is kind of how we create the chunks that we're going to upload. And we can just choose recursive character text splitter. Save this, and then what we want to do is we want to complete the loop. So we want to take this Supabase vector store and just bring it back to the loop, to the beginning of the loop, so that we complete our loop now. And with this workflow, I should be able to run this and take my documents from Clio, upload them to a vector store, so that then I can put an AI agent on top of it and begin to ask questions about my vector database. So if I click execute, so beautiful. So everything worked well, and I should be able to go into Supabase, into my table now, refresh my table, and see all of the information coming in, the last will and testament, the client intake form, all the information that we need is in here. I can even open my metadata as well and see that the file ID is here, and also the file name is here. So I know which chunks came from the intake form. I know which chunks came from the letter to client, all of that good stuff. So we have all that stuff in our database now. And then I'm quickly going to show you how you can throw an agent on top of this, so you can actually have conversations about the information that is in your database as well. So our RAG pipeline, and then on top of this, we're going to put an AI agent. We're going to put a chat trigger, so we can talk to this agent. Then we're going to put an AI agent node, and then we are going to include a chat model as well, OpenAI chat model, and then also a tool just to search the Supabase vector store. So this tool is going to allow it to pull information from the vector store. I just want to include the name of our table, which we have here, and then a description just to tell the agent how to use this tool. Use this tool to perform RAG using the knowledge base. I want to make sure that we connect the correct credential. So have the correct credential in there, grab the table from the list, and now we also need to include our embeddings as well, our OpenAI embeddings. And so now we have our agent sitting on top of this, and we can ask questions about the documents that we have uploaded into our vector database. We can now ask our agent, for example, does John Doe's will specify guardianship for minor children? And then our agent will be able to go and query the knowledge base and come back and give us an answer that we can see here in the bottom left. Yes, John Doe's will specifies guardianship for his minor children. According to the document, if John Doe dies leaving minor children, he nominates Sarah Taylor as the guardian of the person and estate of the said minor children. And we can go back into our documents in Clio and we can check and make sure that this is actually what was said. And so we can actually open up the will and make sure that this is accurate, but the agent was able to correctly pull that if John Doe dies, Sarah Taylor will be the guardian of any minor children that he leaves behind. As always, if you're an attorney trying to figure out how to use AI in your firm, and you want my help to do that, there is a link you can click on in the description. Obviously, it's me trying to sell you something, so it's there if you want it. That's everything for this video. Hopefully, you found it useful. If you are using Clio, hopefully it gave you an idea of how you can, hopefully it gave you a ton of ideas of how you can use Clio and build the workflows and agents to help you automate a ton of stuff going on in your firm. If you did like this video, believe it or not, there's a button for that. You can like that if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment. Let me know what other workflows or what other ideas you have in there or that you want me to build out, or if there's something you're struggling with and you want me to kind of show a video on how to do that. Drop that in the comments. Let me know if you guys want to see the same build but with a local setup. If you guys want to see a version where you can run everything on your own machine or on your own server so that you don't have to worry about sending any data to cloud providers. And then also subscribe and turn on post notifications so you don't miss any more amazing tutorials like these. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for watching this video. Hope you found it useful, and have an amazing rest of your day.